The year was 27 BC, and for the first time in living memory, Rome was quiet. For nearly 100 years, the greatest city on earth had known only chaos, civil wars, assassinations, betrayal, and ambition without end. Julius Caesar had been stabbed beneath the marble arches of the Senate. His killers shouted the word freedom as his blood soaked the floor. But freedom, Rome soon learned, was only another name for anarchy. When the fighting ended, when the fires burned out, there was only one man left standing, Gaius Octavius, Caesar's adopted son. To his enemies he was cold, calculating, patient as stone. To his allies he was salvation, the man who would finally end the madness. In a world exhausted by war, that was all anyone wanted: peace. So, on a morning heavy with mist, the Senate gathered. The people filled the Forum Romanum, whispering the same question. Was it really over? Then the bronze gates of the Temple of Janus, the gates that opened only during times of war, were shut, clanged shut with a sound that echoed across the empire. Rome was at peace. The sound was deafening in its silence. The clamor of armies, the screams of rebellion, the cries of dying kings, all faded beneath that single act. For the first time in generations, mothers slept without fear, markets opened without soldiers, and the Tiber flowed quietly through a city that had forgotten how to breathe. And yet, the peace was not born of forgiveness. It was built from exhaustion and control. Octavian, now called Augustus, had not simply ended the wars. He had outlasted them. Where generals fought for glory, he fought for stability. He didn't just win battles. He built systems that made war unnecessary. The Senate, desperate to keep their city from collapsing again, gave him powers no man had ever held before. He was named Princeps, the first citizen, but everyone knew the truth. Rome was now an empire, and Augustus was its emperor. The streets were swept, the temples rebuilt, and statues of the young ruler rose in every province, calm, youthful, divine. He promised not conquest but continuity. He spoke softly, but his shadow stretched from the deserts of Egypt to the forests of Germania. In distant lands, kings and chiefs looked toward the west and whispered the same name, Augustus, the man who had turned a blood-soaked republic into a world that finally obeyed. But peace in Rome had a strange flavor. It was sweet at first. Trade flourished, art returned, the people feasted. But beneath it all lay the taste of submission. No one dared challenge him. No senator spoke without measuring his words. No general moved his legions without the emperor's seal. It was as if all of Rome had been forged into a single body, disciplined, silent, invincible. The legions became its veins, the emperor its mind, and the people its heartbeat, steady, obedient, unchanging. They called it Pax Romana, the Roman peace. But to those who remembered the chaos before, it was not peace. It was the stillness that follows a storm too powerful to resist. A silence so complete that even the gods seemed afraid to disturb it. As the sun set over the golden rooftops of the city, Augustus stood on his balcony overlooking the Tiber. The air was still, the streets glowing in the amber light. For a moment it looked as if Rome itself had become eternal. But behind that perfection the question lingered. How long can peace built on power truly last? The peace of Rome was no accident. It was constructed. When Augustus became master of the world, he understood something no conqueror before him ever had, that empires do not survive on swords alone. They survive on systems. So while poets sang of harmony, Augustus began to calculate it. He redrew the map of the empire like an engineer reassembling a broken machine. Every province, from Spain's red hills to the deserts of Syria, was catalogued, taxed, and assigned to Roman governors who answered directly to him. He created roads where there had been wilderness, ports where there had been silence, and cities that mirrored the order of Rome itself. It was not peace. It was organization on a planetary scale. In the heart of the capital, the emperor built a new institution, the Praetorian Guard, 10,000 elite soldiers sworn not to defend Rome, but to defend him. Their armor shone brighter than gold, their loyalty sharper than steel. They stood not on the frontiers, but in the streets, watching, listening, reminding everyone that peace had a price. Augustus smiled as he walked among them. He did not need to shout orders. His presence alone was command. Where Caesar had ruled through charisma, Augustus ruled through structure. He was not a warlord. He was a system administrator of civilization. The Senate, once the voice of the Republic, was allowed to survive as decoration. They still debated, still gave speeches, still voted, but every decision began and ended with the emperor's will. It was a masterstroke. He gave the people the illusion of freedom while tightening control over every thread of their lives. In private letters he wrote, "I found Rome a city of brick. I leave it a city of marble." And he meant it literally. The city transformed. New temples, new forums, new monuments to stability. He used architecture as propaganda, each column whispering the same message: Rome is eternal, because I am Rome. Beyond the city walls, he created the imperial bureaucracy, governors, tax collectors, judges, all bound by strict codes of loyalty. For the first time, an empire functioned like a living organism, each part feeding the next. The grain from Egypt filled Roman bellies. Gold from Spain paid Roman soldiers, and Roman law spread like veins of marble across continents. Even the army, once a restless collection of ambitious generals, was rebuilt from the ground up. Legions now swore allegiance not to their commanders, but to the emperor himself. Their banners carried not the names of their leaders, but the image of Augustus. It was no longer the army of Rome. It was Rome itself. To the outside world, the transformation looked divine. Temples overflowed with offerings. Merchants from 3 continents traded in the same currency. The Mediterranean glittered like a Roman lake. But inside the empire, something deeper was happening. People began to forget what freedom had felt like. There were no more riots, no more assassinations, no more chaos, but also no more voices. Peace had become so perfect that even thought felt dangerous. When Augustus stood before the Senate in his old age, he looked tired, not from ruling, but from holding the world still. He had done what no mortal before him had achieved. He turned power into order, and order into myth. As he raised his hand to dismiss the assembly, the senators bowed their heads. They weren't just saluting a ruler. They were saluting the system that had replaced the republic, the idea that had replaced democracy, the dream that one man could control the chaos of mankind forever. But even Augustus knew what his marble monuments could not say aloud. Every perfect machine eventually cracks, and somewhere, far beyond Rome's glittering walls, the first tremors had already begun. By the time Augustus grew old, Rome was no longer a city. It was a system. Across 3 continents, roads cut through mountains, bridges crossed rivers that once divided tribes, and aqueducts carried water as if the earth itself obeyed Roman law. From the deserts of Arabia to the forests of Germania, every milestone bore the same symbol, SPQR, the Senate and people of Rome. But behind that proud inscription was something new, something larger than any senate or people, an empire that had learned to run itself. The legions no longer fought for glory. They were administrators with swords. They built cities, carved tunnels, and laid roads that stretched for thousands of miles. Arteries of stone pulsing with the lifeblood of the empire. Trade, order, control. A merchant could leave the sands of Egypt, travel through Judea, across Greece, and arrive in Spain without ever leaving Roman territory. Ships crossed the Mare Nostrum, our sea, in perfect safety. Pirates were gone, bandits vanished. Even rumors of rebellion were crushed before they spread. To the world, it felt like a miracle. To the Romans, it felt like destiny. This was the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. 2 centuries where the world forgot what chaos felt like. In Rome itself, the people thrived. Markets overflowed with silk from China, spices from India, gold from Africa. Philosophers debated beneath marble colonnades. Poets praised the emperor's wisdom. Sculptors immortalized his face in bronze. And children grew up believing the world had always been this way. Calm, orderly, eternal. But peace came with rules. Every word spoken, every grain traded, every temple built, all flowed through invisible lines of command. Tax collectors in far provinces sent reports to governors, who sent them to Rome, where scribes copied them into archives that stretched endlessly across marble halls. Rome knew everything, saw everything, owned everything. The empire had become a living organism, part human, part machine. Legions guarded its borders like nerves reacting to pain. The Senate whispered like a fading conscience. And at the center of it all sat the emperor, still, divine, silent. Under Augustus's successors, the machine only grew stronger. Tiberius ruled with paranoia, Caligula with madness, Claudius with obsession, Nero with fire. And yet the empire survived them all. It was as if Rome itself no longer needed great men. The system ran on inertia, on discipline so deeply carved into its bones that even chaos could not break it. Temples rose higher, amphitheaters echoed with cheers, and roads glowed beneath moonlight as caravans moved through the night. The Pax Romana became not a moment in time, but a rhythm, the heartbeat of civilization. But in the shadows of this perfection, a quiet truth was growing. The same order that had made Rome unbreakable was slowly draining it of soul. Where there had once been ambition, there was now obedience. Where there had once been faith, there was bureaucracy. And where there had once been freedom, there was fear. The fear of breaking the silence. The empire no longer needed heroes. It needed maintenance. And in that maintenance, something deeply human was beginning to die. When a Roman general once asked a captured barbarian what he thought of Roman peace, the man laughed and said, "They make a desert, and they call it peace." To the world, the Pax Romana looked eternal, but beneath its marble skin, hairline cracks began to form, invisible, silent, and unstoppable. Because no machine, no matter how perfect, can rule the human heart forever. Peace is never eternal. It simply hides the storm until someone dares to break the silence. For Rome, that silence began to crack from within. Augustus had built the empire on order, but order has a cost. It demands obedience. And when obedience replaces freedom, even peace becomes a kind of prison. The emperors who followed him inherited his system, but not his restraint. The first cracks appeared under Tiberius, Augustus's heir. He was a soldier, brilliant and cold, but the peace he ruled was not the peace he felt. Suspicion consumed him. He saw betrayal in every senator, conspiracy in every smile, as Rome glittered in marble. Its ruler hid on the island of Capri, surrounded by spies and secret executions. The Pax Romana continued, quiet, efficient, bloodless on the surface, but beneath it fear began to whisper. Then came Caligula. At first Rome adored him, young, charismatic, the grandson of heroes. Crowds cheered his name, calling him the new Augustus. But power has a way of revealing what peace hides. Caligula demanded not obedience, but worship. He declared himself a living god, built temples in his own name, and filled them with statues of himself dressed as Jupiter, Mars, and Apollo. He turned the Senate into jesters, forcing them to bow and kiss his feet. He ordered his soldiers to march into the sea and collect shells as trophies of victory over Neptune. Rome laughed, nervously. The machine Augustus had built still worked. The roads still ran, the legions still obeyed, trade still flowed. But the soul of Rome, its dignity, its meaning, had begun to rot. When Caligula was finally stabbed to death by his own guards, the people didn't mourn. They simply exhaled, a sigh of a city too used to fear to remember outrage. After him came Claudius, a scholar emperor who hid behind scrolls and secretaries. He expanded the empire to Britain, strengthened the bureaucracy, and wrote history. But his palace whispered with corruption. Freedmen and servants ruled through him, selling favors and titles like merchandise. Rome's power had become a business, and then came Nero, the golden boy of Rome, poet, musician, emperor. He promised art, not war, beauty, not blood. But beauty turned to madness. He performed on stage while senators pretended to applaud. He built a palace larger than entire cities while the common people starved. And when fire consumed Rome in 64 AD, rumor said Nero watched from a balcony. Playing his lyre as the flames devoured the city, he blamed the Christians, crucified them by the hundreds, turned men into torches to light his gardens. Peace still existed, technically. The legions were quiet. The borders were safe. The taxes still flowed. But in every heart, the Pax Romana had turned from blessing to curse. This was peace without mercy, order without soul, control without humanity. The Senate dared not speak. The people dared not whisper. The empire was still strong, but its strength had become hollow, its perfection brittle. And yet, for all their corruption, for all their madness, these emperors could not destroy what Augustus had built. Rome endured them. The system absorbed their chaos like a wall absorbs shadows. That was the terrifying genius of Rome. It did not need good men to survive. It needed only the illusion of stability. And as Nero died alone, hunted, whispering, "What an artist dies in me," the empire he ruled in madness marched on without pause. Its legions still marching, its people still obeying, its machine still humming. Rome had become immortal, not because of its glory, but because it no longer knew how to die. For 200 years, the world lived under a single name, Rome. From the misty shores of Britain to the burning sands of Arabia, her banners rose and her laws ruled. Children were born, lived and died, never knowing war. To them, peace was not a blessing. It was the natural state of the universe. But all peace has a cost, and all perfection hides decay. After Nero's fall, the empire rebuilt itself once more. From the chaos rose a new dynasty, soldiers, not poets, realists, not dreamers. They were called the Five Good Emperors, and under them, Rome reached the very summit of its glory. Trajan, the conqueror, expanded the borders farther than any before him. From Dacia's gold mines to Mesopotamia's rivers, his legions carried the eagle, where no Roman had ever marched. When he stood upon the ruins of Babylon, he wept, not for victory, but for the weight of eternity. He knew what every conqueror eventually learns, that beyond the horizon, there is always another border, another war, another empire waiting to rise. His successor, Hadrian, understood what Trajan did not, that conquest cannot last forever. He pulled the empire back within walls, quite literally. Across the misty highlands of Britain, he built a wall that cut the island in two, not to expand, but to end. He said, "Rome's greatness lies not in how far we reach, but in how long we endure." Under Antoninus Pius, the empire entered its golden dusk. Taxes were fair, wars were few, and even the gods seemed content to rest. From the streets of Rome to the deserts of Egypt, the peace of Augustus still held. The machine still functioned, the roads still thrummed, the legions still watched, and then came Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher, on the throne, a man who ruled not with ambition but with thought. In his tent on the frozen frontiers, he wrote words that would outlive marble and steel. What we do now echoes in eternity. For Marcus, peace was not just the absence of war, it was the discipline of the soul. He ruled wisely, but even the wisest emperor cannot stop time. Beyond the Danube, the tribes stirred again. Barbarians, the word Romans used for everyone who lived beyond their order, pressed against the empire's walls. And this time Rome's legions were tired. The perfect machine that had once conquered the world was now creaking under its own weight. Trade slowed. Plagues spread. Faith began to shift. Temples to Jupiter stood empty while whispers of a new god, a crucified one, began to rise in secret. The empire had given the world order, law and civilization, but in doing so it had forgotten the one thing it could not control, the human soul's hunger for meaning. When Marcus died, his son Commodus took the throne, a man more interested in games than governance, more in glory than legacy. And with him, the age of peace began to crumble. The Pax Romana had lasted nearly 2 centuries, a miracle of administration, strategy, and willpower. But all miracles fade. As the centuries passed, Rome's borders shrank. Its gods fell silent. Its emperors turned to dust. And yet, the idea of Rome lived on. Its roads became the paths of new nations. Its language became the root of half the world's tongues. Its law, its order, its ambition, all echoed long after the legions had vanished into history. The Pax Romana ended, but its shadow never did. For in every city that prizes peace over chaos, in every nation that builds before it destroys, in every heart that dreams of stability in a restless world, Rome still breathes. The empire may have fallen, but the peace it built still rules us.